Oseo. It's a
Oseo.
Cherokee greeting. Namaste.
Namaste.
That's Hindu. And Yatahe. That's Navajo.
Yatahe.
All is well. India. Take pride in indigenous communities, the Prime Minister says. We are starting in India, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi challenged youth to take pride in indigenous communities because of their contribution to the struggle of freedom. The Times of India just reported. He was speaking during his Man Ki Baat, the national monthly radio program that he had started to address citizens' concerns. Modi spoke about one of India's indigenous freedom fighters, Birsa Munda of the Jakartan tribe, and challenged the young people to read more about him. Quote, "The more you learn about his contribution and that of all India's tribal communities in struggle for freedom, the more you would want to take pride in them," he said. During the program, Modi also explained that the term Dharti Abba, which has been associated with Birsa Munda, means father of the nation, adding that it is only a father who can lead a relentless struggle to defend the land, the water, and the forest of his people. And I'm following that with a very currently penned haiku written by Nancy Sandwis of the San Diego Blue Stocking. Quote, "DNA shows the author's kinship with Sitting Bull. Native American voices never silenced." Oh. Well, everybody knows that we just finished Halloween. That's an old English term for hallowed evening. And in Gaelic, it's Samhain. Samhain is the end of summer. And it begins a whole new season, a different kind of season that we'll talk about. And what I am continuing with is the theme I started 2 weeks ago with the Hindu goddess Kali. But starting right off in this case with the Mary Oliver poem, so we get the feel of autumn. Her poem here is Fall. The black oaks fling their bronze fruit into all the pockets of the earth. Pock, pock. They knock against the thresholds, the roof, the sidewalk, fill the eaves, the bottom line of the old gold song of the almost finished year. What is spring? All that tender green stuff compared to this falling of tiny oak trees out of the oak trees. Then the clouds gathering thick along the west, and then advancing, then closing over, breaking open. The silence, then the rain, dashing its silver seas against the house, sing their endless small alphabets. So that's how we can start this feeling. I'm merging the Kali. I kept up most of the Kali display that I had last week because I'm merging it into the Navajo. So some things that I'm just going to say something of it. Kali is translated into English as black, the word black. The word black in English is very limited because it comes from soot. The word dark or darkness in our language has an etymology that's much closer to, in India, Ratri, the night. It's much closer to the night. So Kali somehow has been just figured and rendered and everything in terms of black and other macabre and strange sort of things, which, you know, sort of makes it look different than it really is. The name Kali is really coming from Kalaratri. It means the night, but it means the darkest night, or the darkest part of the night when there is no moon. And that kind of gives the right rendering here. Also, I had mentioned before, there is a real philosophy, a real culture of the real Kali behind all the macabre sort of things, and it's, you know, titled the Kali Tattva, and that means Kali, the hidden principle. And I just had mentioned that, but I am aware of this culture for a long time, and I'm only just touching upon it here as I did last week. So some of the things that I have already had here, my image here, you know, for Kali as a Devi. And then you can go down there. There I put a black cat for this sense that I'm trying to bring out today. And then you can move up to this silhouette black figure with a candle, and behind it there is my painting of her as a woman. The word nude doesn't quite say what it is in Hindi. It means unclad. It means that the fact, the truth, is self-revealing, and so she's usually figured as, quote, you know, unclad. And here I have this black silhouette in order to give a sense, an idea of what we're trying to talk about with this figure here. And with that, I'm going to read a Michael McClure piece here. This is, in honor of blackness is her body. Song. Sure, let's celebrate the black side of joy. Let's drown the cup of cheer in the barrel full of wine. Let us see the wild flower's face, all mauve and purple and bright yellow, flattened by the pages of a book. The spider is also pressed there, who was once happy, chasing flies. I worship all that is black. To be alive is a shock, like listening to the banshee singing inside of a rock. What a piece of black spirit you are. Thank you, Michael. Now to move up into this piece up here, now we're moving into the Navajo and the relation, correlation, and correspondence of Navajo to this theme. The Europeans and European Americans have a very unilateral, lopsided view of indigenous people in this country. And I'm one who definitely hopes to see that change. So right here on this particular subject, the people of Navajo, they're actually, it's a name evidently derived from the Spaniards or Creole Spanish. On their early maps, they actually title it Apache de Navajo, meaning keepers of the field, referring to evidently that these people had orchards, fruit orchards, and so forth. And they are not Aborigines, they are actually immigrants. And where they've immigrated from is in the area of Khotan, the Tarim Basin. Their language shows that the roots are Western Turkestan. And that area, Khotan, is where their relatives still live. Now these people called Navajo call themselves Diné. And the people, their relatives, and where they have stem from, use an article, not Diné, meaning the people. And so that's quite evident because those people are still there, and they're very well known for their weaving of rugs. I have one. And I heard Navajos say, whatever you read in books, we have always had horses and sheep. And so I would say they do. The Navajos have very much been able to keep intact, their true culture. And, well, one thing is, how did they come to be here? Over the Bering Straits? No, they didn't come over the Bering Straits. They came on Chinese ships. In the 15th century, the Ming Chinese had built ocean-going ships. And these ships were in a kind of a trade commerce with Western Mexico. The export of Mexico in the 15th century was leaf tobacco. So now you know in China what those old guys were doing with those long pipes and what they were smoking. So that's where the tobacco came from. And in exchange, or by way of that, people from that part of the world came over here, landed in Mexico, and traveled up into the areas of New Mexico and Arizona. And towards the end of the 19th century, when you had ethnologists and anthropologists, talking to these people, there were people who still remembered, how long, when they had arrived and how long they had been here, and so forth. So that would be from the 15th century. But the roots of the language and parts of it, definitely show the roots are Turkestanic. The anthropologists here do rather recognize the people that the Americans call Apache as somehow linguistic relatives of the Navajo. The Apaches are actually the Turkoman. The Turkoman, they're also in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Kazan, in those countries. They're scattered all through there. They are the Turkoman. And they do speak Turkish. And also very recently, a Native American group seeking commerce with the country of Turkey had traveled to Turkey, and one of them was a Navajo woman. And this was all reported in the Indian Country Today newspaper. She realized that she could understand what people were speaking while she was in Turkey. And probably at the time, little did she realize that her language is also based in the Turkish language. And so that's very true. Also, in a bilingual, if I could call it, book of Hieronymo, I recognized that there were Turkish words, and I looked it up. Indeed, Hieronymo was also speaking a Turkish language. So these people came over in ships. Now, there's a further correlation here that I'm trying to get at. This book is Navajo Tibetan Sacred Wisdom, the Circle of the Spirit. Now, this author has very thoroughly, very competently taken the subject of the Navajo and the subject of the Tibetans, and tit for tat, match, all the way through the correlation of the two people. To start with, he has both peoples, respective parts of the world, live at the same latitude, and their plateaus are at the same, more or less, altitude. And he's gone through and taken everything, like sand paintings, symbols like the swastika, and so forth, and showed, totally how these are correlating. So the area that the Navajo relatives, or their predecessors, have come from would be west of Tibet, the western part of the Himalayas. In that area I know as Khotan. And that would suffice, to support, all this view of why we have this. So for here, my painting I have done, to tell you what it is, it's a mask, a helmet type of mask that fits on an impersonator in the kind of ceremonies, their healing ceremonies, that the Navajo have. The English translates this as black god, but there is no black god in Navajo, not at all. What's being translated is Hashishasini, and I can best translate that as blackness is her body. And right below it, this little sand painting gives a fair idea of who I'm talking about. And the zigzag there is the Milky Way, and the person is carrying a fire starter. So he's connected with fire, basically lighting the stars in the sky. Now, back up to my painting of this. Previously, I did a sort of a series of these Navajo masks, as we'll call them, they're all up there in Nevada, and I had a show of these in the public library up there, where I actually strove to, not this one's painted, but to have the actual materials. I mean, they would all be, two-dimensional, but like this would be leather, and the red would be, hair and fur, that kind of thing. The registration there showed about 300 people had come to see that show. So that was pretty good. What's very significant in this image is the only one like it because it shows the constellations. And let's see. This is the month. This, the full moon to the crescent moon. This symbolizes the month. These two are called the revolvers. They revolve around the pole star. So this is the male star, and that would be the Big Dipper, and this is Cassiopeia. So male revolver and female revolver. And then most interesting is this is always the configuration that the Navajos use for the Pleiades. And what the Pleiades means is, in Navajo, is Tilgehi. Tilgehi means the pointer. It's actually pointing to something, to the way of something. And then the story that accompanies this arrangement has this person, blackness is her body is the best way to do it, come into the Earth Hogan of Earth Woman. And Earth Woman's little children, start jumping around her feet, the black woman's feet. And so she stamps her feet, and then they jump up to her ankle, and she stamps again, they jump up to her knee. And she stamps again, they jump up to her hip. She stamps again, they get up to her shoulder, and stamps again, and they land up here in her temple. This is really describing the ascendancy of this constellation that would be taking place in the sky. And so that's pretty much how it is. Now, why the English is translating this as black god, in other words, God is a male, because the mask itself is considered male. The content is her, but the mask is male. You understand that. And it is a helmet mask, so it totally fits over the head of the impersonator. Just for example, now this here is a domino mask. That's just flat in front of your face. And it accompanies in the ceremony, this is Hashish Ba'at, meaning this is the female spirit or goddess, like that. So that's why I have that here. So all of this, is to symbolize this character against, the night sky. Now what we have at this point is at the end of the year, in the matriarchal, we're going to call it the matriarch, the great mother, great woman culture, which here in Native America, there are remnants of. The Navajos evidently have the most, as far as I know, of this. Now what we're talking about is that at the winter solstice, you know, or the beginning of the year, that is the conception of us. We are living in her, like we're living in her body as her term. And that our life, our daylight life, is living, we're her fetuses, you do that, living through her. And after the 10 months, you know, of gestation, at the end of the year, that's now, then we are born, and we're born into her. And so now this period here has no time to it. You see, you know, like saying that our whole period in term, that was time. But now our birth into her there is no time. And so this, you know, of course, repeats, you know, has a cycle, you know, to it till the winter solstice starts again. But that's why we're having this here, when I'm saying blackness is her body, and how that it correlates, you know, to, you know, Kali, as blackness is her body. And everywhere what's happened is the patriarchy, is the way we refer to it, has kind of overshadowed all of these cultural concepts and so forth of the female, the feminine, and so forth. Amazingly, Native America, Turtle Island, was of the matriarchy until Western Europeans began to invade. And as they did, they had cast this shadow of an eclipse of a patriarchy all over Native America and so forth. But here and there, and the Navajos are one of them, still have some remnant, as it really is, but pretty complete remnant for this patriarchal view, that if we can realize that of ourselves, we might be relieved quite seriously. All of these things I am touching on almost like as an introduction. And with that, this is my drawing that I wanted to show with this theme here. I feel that my drawing here expresses what I'm talking about. Now, lastly, I have a poem from India. It's interesting that this is a poem by the poet Nissim Ezekiel. And he was born in Bombay in 1924, and his parents are referred to as Ben Israeli. That is, that he's a Jewish Hindu poet, and was the first modern poet in India's modern literature. He was educated in Bombay and also in London, and then was the professor of English at the University of Bombay. He wrote several books. And this poem is what I really want to finish this theme with, titled Poet, Lover, Bird Watcher. To force the pace and never to be still is not the way of those who study birds or women. The best poets wait for words. The hunt is not an exercise of will, but patient love relaxing on a hill to note the movement of a timid wing, until the one who knows that she is loved no longer waits, but risks surrendering. In this the poet finds his moral proved, who never spoke before his spirit moved. The slow movement seems somehow to say much more. To watch the rarer birds, you have to go along deserted lanes and where the river flows in silence near the source, or by a shore remote and thorny like the heart's dark floor. And there the women slowly turn around, not only flesh and bone, but myths of light, with darkness at their core, and the sense is found by poets lost in crooked and restless flight. The deaf can hear, the blind recover sight. Now the uncommon bird no longer is the live one who flashes at me.